welcome to Keenan Yoga Podcast episode. I don't know how many we've done, so this one is a solo episode from me. What else do I have to say before we start? Well, I'm just in Bali right now, teaching an intensive for 2 weeks, and I'll be on my way to Europe again for a full gamut of workshops over the spring, early summer season. So I hope to see you there. If I don't see you before, well, I probably won't see you before, but hope to see you in some of those Europe workshops. And if I'm not coming to where you are, where you'd like me to be, then just drop me a line and let me know, and I will come and visit you. If I can make it possible, I will totally make it possible. So let's get on to today's subject. I've entitled it pithily, when the shit hits the fan. So what to do when when you have an established practice, when you're practicing along and everything's going nicely, but then all of a sudden life happens and you find you're in trouble, right? And you don't know what to do with your practice, right? And this I've divided into 3 sections. The first, where something physical goes wrong, i.e. you get injured, right? Which happens, and it's not to blame. First of all, not to blame ourselves, right? Because often we think, well, if we hadn't done that, if we hadn't pushed so hard, it's all our fault. We're stupid, right? And if your internal dialogue is anything like mine, that's probably how you're going to think of it. And the second is mental emotionals, like when emotionally things are trying for you. Maybe you had a breakup, maybe you're going through a mental health difficulty with depression, anxiety. These things happen. They happen to me as well. So life has its ups and downs, and definitely that mental emotional is in some ways harder than the physical, I often find, right? Physical you can deal with as an injury, plain and simple. And mental emotionals, they're a little bit more tricky, a little bit more ambiguous sometimes. So, third one, circumstantial. Like simply when life circumstances prevail against you. You start a new job. You've got no time anymore because you have to do this massive commute. Or perhaps someone else in your family gets sick or ill or needs a hand and takes up all your focus, and you can't practice anyway either because you're caring for someone else, or this your life circumstances because you need to make money and you're in this situation where you're doing a long day or a long commute, or just you can't do the practice for whatever reason on that level, circumstantial. So we're dividing this topic into 3 parts to repeat. The physical, well, usually the only thing I can think of with the physical challenge is really, well, actually, I was going to say it's just injury, but actually, say you're suffering really low energy, you've got no energy anymore, or you just can't shake off some kind of low-lying kind of symptoms, right? Especially these days with everything that's buzzing around, we do have these autoimmunes more than ever. It's just this feeling of just not that well all the time, tired, groggy, low energy, maybe nauseous, dizzy, all these symptoms that are plaguing us more than ever, I think. So it's not just injury, in fact. And the mental emotionals we've just been through. So yeah, we could say perhaps it's a particular cause. You've had a breakup, you've had a death or some challenge that's an obvious cause to your suffering. Yeah? Or maybe it's just simply life. Yeah, you're depressed about the state of the world, or just suffer with bouts of depression, anxiety like myself, free floating, let's say. And that's making it really hard to practice, or practice seems to be leaving you when you do your normal practice. It doesn't necessarily make you feel better. It might make you feel worse. We'll come to that in a second. And then finally, life circumstances. Life gets in the way. Maybe you change the job, or maybe it's caring for someone else, something like that. That's just stopping you doing your normal practice. And what do you do then? Right? So when the shit hits the fan, this is today's subject. And like anyone else, I'm sure, like all of you listening, stuff comes up, and it's come up for me as well. So of course I'm speaking from my own experience. If you can tip in with anything else that you might say from your own experience, then it's always appreciated. This is a 2-way discussion. I'm not really an autocrat. I find myself reluctantly in the state of being a teacher, in inverted commas, but really I just like to discuss stuff, really. I like to facilitate discussions. I like to learn, share, and toss issues over with each other. I'm sick of hearing my own voice. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. Anyway, if I can be of service, I will. And so subsequently, I think I've got a couple of things to say, and I shall discuss them now. So we've divided it into 3 parts, and we'll start with the physical. So how do you deal with physical setbacks, right? Either injury or just like low-lying malaise, like low-lying tiredness, etc., etc. Well, first of all, get a hold of the context of the practice, right? If you're doing Ashtanga, and well, Ashtanga yoga, Patabi Joyce is Ashtanga yoga, not potentially. But if you're doing the Ashtanga yoga practice, you probably feel like you need to do the whole thing, right? Maybe you've been told that all the sequence follows one posture, follows the next posture, and you have to do the whole thing for it to make sense. Or if you don't do the last posture, you can't do the next posture, like it's some kind of magic spell or magic combination lock. It's not. That's not the way that Krishnamacharya taught at the Mysore Palace. And of course, Krishnamacharya was Pattabhi Jois's teacher. He taught all the boys the Surya Namaskar, and after the Surya Namaskar, the sun salutations, he gave them their own practices. And the sequences, Pattabhi Jois's sequences, probably came about for the need to do regular yoga demonstrations, because Krishnamacharya's boss was the Maharaj of Mysore, and the Maharaj of Mysore was using yoga in part to promote a political context of strong indigenous Indian art that was to restore morale against the colonial British, right? To restore the Indian morale. So these yoga demonstrations were really important. Krishnamacharya, part of his job spec was to give these yoga demonstrations, and it's likely that Pattabhi Jois got drawn in as one of the head boys to leading them. And at that point, they came in with the particular sequences. That's our idea of how the sequences came up now. Of course, we have this myth, well, I'm calling it a myth, maybe you won't think of it like that, of the Yoga Karunta that Pattabhi Jois said for many years, that there was this text, as Krishnamacharya did later, the Yoga Karunta that contained all this information. But of course, doesn't really add up, because Krishnamacharya never taught the Ashtanga sequences as when he left the Mysore Palace. So if there was this Yoga Karunta, then I assume that he would have stuck to it, but he always taught individually. And so what I'm suggesting here is get a context, get a grip of Hatha Yoga behind the Ashtanga style. Perhaps you can't do the jumping because you're injured or tired. Perhaps you can't do many of the postures because you're injured or tired. But you could do something, right? You can do something, and it's still the rudiments, the fundamental foundations of the yoga are still there. The Ashtanga is just a style. That's what I'm suggesting. The context of the Ashtanga practice was never set in stone like it is often presented now, right? Just because you can't do it in the way that it's traditionally, in inverted commas, because that tradition is modern, meant to be, doesn't mean you can't practice traditional yoga just as you were. Just the same as you were. Pick a posture. Maybe you can only do one posture comfortably. Pick a few postures in part of a sequence. Pick anything, and you can still use the fundamental tenets of yoga, i.e. trying to get a hold of the diaphragm in the breathing, stimulating the spine, concentrating the mind, using the technique of vinyasa, breath movement together. You can use these fundamental tenets, these fundamental cornerstones of the practice without following a particular sequence even. And when you come back, when you're ready, Ashtanga yoga in all its glory will still be there for you, right, if you want to. But you can still practice the bare bones of this practice without following the specifics of Ashtanga yoga. That's not what qualifies you as a traditional practitioner. The foundations of yoga that are the same in any yoga style, whatever you do, are always, can you breathe diaphragmatically? Are you able to stimulate the spine by drawing pressure in a stretch? And this is where it gets complicated, by drawing pressure in a stretch inwardly towards the spine, i.e. pulling together rather than just stretching yourself apart, which is the difference between active stretching and passive stretching, which I've talked about elsewhere. So if you're able to do those things, and if you're able to concentrate your mind, and if you're able to move synchronistically with breath and movement suited together, then you're practicing yoga, for God's sakes. Doesn't rest on perfecting, getting the vinyasa right, or perfecting a posture, or making sure that all the postures are done one by one. Like you might go to a modern Mysore class and you forget a posture, or you are injured and you can't do a posture, and they're on your case immediately. Why did you leave out that posture? So it makes you think that Ashtanga yoga, or yoga generally, is about following a certain precedent. It's not, these are just training wheels. That following the certain sequence is like scales. And it's also a great teaching technique, because if everyone does whatever they want in a Mysore class, in a self-practice class, the teacher can't teach because it's all over the place. So it's good for everyone to do the similar practice. And it's good also for a sense of collectivity. But what I've said again and again in all these podcasts is that it's taking the finger for the moon to think that getting the sequence in order and sticking to the sequence every day and doing your whole practice in inverted commas every day is being a traditional Ashtanga yoga student. It's not. These are just tools, they're techniques for you to use, not the other way around. Right? Anyway, rant over on that one. Secondly, nothing lasts forever. I know when you have an injury or a pain, you think, this is it. I'm never going to be able to lift the arm again because my shoulder hurts, right? I'm never going to be able to do a back bend again because I have this tweak in my back. But, and I thought that as well. I've been in the position of not being able to do many things. I've had pain that's in my shoulder so bad that I could hardly lift my arm past 90 degrees, right? But things change. Sometimes you just need to give that area a rest that area. And that means that you can also do something else, right? You've got all these postures. I've always suggested do what you can of the primary and do what you can of the intermediate series as well. Even if you can't perfect the primary, there's going to be some second series, some intermediate series postures you can do. Yep. So then if you bring the intermediate into it as well, you've got all these postures. You've got a whole toolbox of postures, right? Even if you can't perfect them, even if you can't do them perfectly. And after all, when the first yoga students went to Mysore to practice with Patabi Choice, they got the intermediate series and the primary series as one series within 3 months. Of course, not perfectly. They didn't learn them perfectly. They spent the next 20, 30, 40 years trying to perfect these postures, but they got the outline, the rough sketch. That's the way it was originally taught. Yep. So if you've got, say, the rough sketch of the 2 series, right, and you can't do X, Y, or Z because of injury or fatigue, pick the postures you can do and you enjoy and they make you feel good. I mean, sometimes you have to play to your strengths as well. And when you're in difficulties, I'd say that's really a time to play to your strengths and not challenge yourself too much. Yeah, that comes later when you're feeling good, when everything is good. Then you can up the ante, so to speak. But when you're not feeling good, when life is challenging, when circumstances are challenging you, then play to your strengths, for God's sakes. So you've got these 2 series, right? You've got many postures in the second series, which you can do, even if you can't do all the primary series postures, right? And do the ones that feel good. Do the ones that you get the feeling out of. Do the ones that work for you, that don't cause you injury. Yep. And rest and allow you to rest the part of your body that is injured and needs a rest. Yeah. Because sometimes you really need a rest, that area, to let it recover. And especially in this practice where we're told to do the same thing every day and we never let the area recover. Now, if you were in a gym, or if you were an athlete doing different, athletics, you would rest one area and work on another area, like in a gym workout. Yeah, you don't train the same part of the body every day. You train it maybe once a week, and then you train legs one day and shoulders the other day and arms the other day. And so you allow a lot of rest. But in yoga, we don't do that. We're tipping ourselves into the zone of RSI, repetitive strain, in an injury, through doing the same thing every day. It's crazy, really, right? So you need to rest an area, but say your legs say you've got injury of the leg or you've got injury of the lower back, you can do the upper body. You can do something. You could always do something. And however injured, tired, whatever I've always found something I can do, and to get on the mat and do something. Yep. Because you always can. Or perhaps you feel like, I can't bear to see what I can't do in my yoga. I can't bear to see my limitations right now when I'm used to doing X, Y, and Z. Use your yoga then to do something else. Go for a walk, do some other training, go to the gym and use the breathing and use the focus to do a bit of strength training where you do feel good. You can use the same principles. It's not exactly the same thing. Yep. It's easy to tip into syncretism. Like everything is the same. It's not the same, but it's similar. And a lot of the crossover skills that you've learned in yoga, you can then apply to those things if you really can't bear to do yoga right now. Apply it to walking. Yep. Apply it to gym training. You can, there's always a way to move, and it's worth moving every day. And however tired you are, once you start, often feel a little bit better. And the hardest part is the starting. And when you started, you often do feel there's a bit more energy coming, It's tough. I know it's tough, but it is worth keeping a hand in and doing something, even if it isn't the yoga practice. I felt the same when I had a shoulder injury. I couldn't bear to see my practice and how bad it was. So I just did something else for a while, to be honest. Yep. For a month or 2, I did other things where I felt good again. Yep. And then I came back to yoga. And often when you come back, nothing much is lost. It takes a year or 2 to lose the flexibility, to lose the ability in a particular set of movements. Yep. So taking a month off here or there is small fry. It really makes no difference. I know you will think, if I don't do it every day or every week, I'll lose it. I'll lose that ability I worked so hard for. Not the case at all, I promise you. and then focus on other aspects of yoga. Now, I know it's a bit cliche, but yoga is more than the asana, and perhaps you can't do the yoga practice, physical asana practice, and you're doing a little bit of running or walking or gym or something else, dance, something that makes you feel good. Well, you can still keep your hand in with your yoga training by reading some text. Set aside a bit of time every day and think, well, I'm going to keep my yoga hand in, as it were. I'm going to keep in that yoga stream by doing a bit of reading, like reading some inspiring yoga text or philosophical text or religious text that work for you, that keep you challenged on that, because at the end of the day, really yoga is a process of self-inquiry. It's a process of going deeper into your own consciousness and going towards awareness rather than material world, which is heading away from awareness. So it's that simple, really, In material world, we always try to distract ourselves away from self-consciousness, self-consciousness. And in the yoga sphere, we're trying to work towards coming back to ourselves and away from distracting ourselves to see consciousness, It's as simple as that, really. So anything that allows you to develop a certain sense of circumspection, and centering the mind, that's yoga. And whatever you do physically, then that's good as well. But the two don't have to always go together. You can do them separately too. And finally, on the physical aspect, on the more tangible aspect of the physicality of whatever's going on with you, find out more about it. Once you've got knowledge, you've got power. Look at the internet. Of course, don't scare yourself, but look and see what other people are saying about your condition. If it's an autoimmune, if it's a particular injury you've got of your body, do some research. It usually makes you feel better, not worse. Find out other stories of people that have overcome it, and also read the good stuff. Don't read the bad stuff, like have the best perspective on it. Have the most optimistic perspective, not the most pessimistic perspective. You don't need that, right? Find the good stories, read them, take courage, inspire yourself, because half the time it's just like having understanding of what's going on. It gives you a better perspective, a more optimistic perspective. And at the end of the day, as we know, body and mind are related. That's what we're doing here. We're understanding that the energy of the body affects the mind. So if you inspire the mind and feel more positive in the mind, it's going to have a huge knock-on effect for the body. If you're feeling shit in the mind, it's going to affect the pain. I mean, they've done studies and studies and studies about this now. Pain is affected by the level of the state, let's say, of your mind. The more you're inspired in life, the more you're optimistic about life, even the pain is there, it doesn't feel the same. Of course. The two go together. So if you keep inspired, keep up, keep reading, keep trying to not let the injury dominate you, but rather in some way dominate it by knowing all about it and other people that have faced it and what the prognosis is and what they say, that really, really helps to keep your good mind state. Okay. So I'm sure we can say more about the physical, but let's move on to the mental, emotional. And of course, I've had physical injuries. I had a couple of big injuries in my life, lower back trouble in my early period of yoga, meniscus, knee injuries, the tearing of the cartilage in my early years of yoga. And then later on, a shoulder injury came, unfortunately, to bear in my late 30s. And those 2 points were actually, not to be too Pollyanna, not to be too faux optimistic, but actually my biggest learning curves came in my injuries. That's when you really learn how to do stuff better, right? So first of all, finally to wrap up the injuries, that is it's a chance for you to look further. Obviously something when you're injured, it's not your fault, but obviously there's something you could do differently, working with your body to get around that. So it's a chance to look deeper, because when you've got that animal energy, when you've got that vibe going on, you kind of get caught up in the wave, right? So you're not really looking, right? So what you think are your best practices are often actually your worst practices, right? When you're just recreating the wheel, you're feeling great, you had a great practice, but actually no learning has happened. You've just done it on the vibe, just done it because you had a big glass of coffee and you're feeling pretty good, right? But nothing is learning. It's when you're really up against it, when you start to learn about yourself and how to move and what's efficient movement and effective movement and what's not. Those are the only times I've really learned, because I'm pretty stubborn and pretty pig-headed, when I've had to learn, when my body has not allowed me to do those things, and I've had to look again. And then it's made me a better practitioner by 1000%, and definitely a better teacher by even more than that. Anyway, we said we're going to get onto the mental, emotional side now. So what I was going to say is this is perhaps the area I have most specialism in, having been quite candid about my own mental health in my early 20s and suffering depression and anxiety off and on. I don't think you ever fully get rid of it if you're a sufferer of these things. I think that perhaps they're in your DNA, perhaps they're in your genetics, but they're certainly from early conditioning and those neurological pathways, they're pretty deep, right? We call them vasanas, right? Or samskaras in yoga terminology, right? Those synaptic links, right? To run down those negative pathways, we run down pretty quickly. They're deep pathways, right? Those synapses have got used to firing together, so they've wired together. Yeah, they fire and they're wired together, and they've created these little pathways, or what's called in yoga grooves, or vasanas, or samskaras. And so it's hard to change those. And of course, over my years, I hope I've shallowed them. I hope I've dug other ones and filled in some of those negative pathways that I run down too easily. But of course, they're still there, and they still do happen. So let's kick off with the mental emotionals. First of all, tone it down, your practice, right? This practice of asana is meant to be stimulating. Okay? Hatha yoga, coming from the roots ha, forceful, is meant to stimulate the spine. Yeah? Is meant to stimulate your nerves. Is meant to put you in a light fight or flight response. Yeah? It's not meant to get you into the parasympathetic nervous system. You can use asana that way to calm you down, to relax, like yin yoga or something, I suppose. But the traditional use of asana in the tantric school, is to stimulate the spine, to change the nerve patterns in the mind. You use the energy of the spine to change the mind. So it's stimulating. And if you're already feeling a bit overwhelmed, a bit emotionally fragile, a bit anxious already, then asana may well increase that. Originally Ayurveda, they used Ayurveda along with asana to calm the overly stimulating aspects of asana. But you don't have that Ayurvedic knowledge anymore. And our modern life is not really grounded at all. So you have to be in a good state of mind to do this. And when you're not, it doesn't mean you can't practice, but it might mean you don't practice hatha yoga in its traditional iteration, its traditional aim to stimulate the spine and stimulate the nerves of the mind. You're using asana a different way perhaps then when you're in an emotionally fragile, tired place. You use asana to calm you. Lots of forward folds. Don't do the Ashtanga practice because it's too fast. It's too stimulating. Intense back bends, leg behind the head, things that overstimulate the spine. Leave them out. Longer holds of the postures, more forward folds, more attention to breath, longer closing sequence, longer shoulder stand, a headstand if you're doing, when you're inverting the body, putting the heart higher than the head, you're coming into the body. So the mind is quieted, and the heart is elevated for some reason. So you can still practice, but just use Ashtanga, and you can still even practice Ashtanga. Having said that you couldn't practice Ashtanga, you can still do the series. Maybe just because you're going to do it a lot slower, and you're going to do a lot more breaths in each posture, maybe you just do just standing or just seated. There's no one way to do this after all, to be a traditional Ashtanga student, right? Just yoga. And you need to use it to suit your life conditions. And life changes all the time. So you have to respect that and use the practice to suit the life accordingly. And sometimes you just need to be in maintenance mode. Sometimes it's just ticking over, right? Sometimes all you can do is just do something, anything. And don't set the bar too high, but keep your hand in. Try and do something. Even if you just step on the mat, one sun salutation and lie down, and then read a bit of yoga philosophy or read the yoga sutras or whatever works for you. Right? At these kind of times, you've got to use things that work for you, that aren't challenging, that you like already, that play to your strengths. But when you're in an emotional situation, be aware that this practice traditionally isn't relaxing. You can use it to relax, but ultimately if you're doing these intense back and forward flexion and twisting the spine, it's enlivening the spine, it's stimulating the nerves of the spine, and it's doing that to destabilize the mind in a certain way. It's trying to shake patterns, it's trying to shake stuff out of the body. It's cathartic, but to be in the state of destabilizing, to let go of, to purge and purify stuff out of the body, that means you need to be in quite a strong position, in your own self. And if you don't find yourself, as many times we don't find ourselves in those positions, then just give it a break for a while and do something that does calm you down. If you finish practice feeling worse than you started, more overstimulated, more anxious, more depressed even, then something has to change, And it's your experiment at the end of the day. Change the practice. Doesn't mean you'll change it forever. Doesn't mean you need to do that forever at all. Just means this is a phase. This is just a phase. Deal with the present. Don't extrapolate upon the future. That's another good little piece of advice, I think, that I give to myself all the time. You can always cope with the present, and you can always do stuff in the present that works. Don't worry about its implications in the future. Things will change in the future. You may go back to the full practice in the future. You may not. But you'll deal with that then. You can't deal with the future now. And to try to do so or worry about it, it's just going to tip you over the edge. You don't need to. Deal with the present. You can always deal with the present. So, coming onto our third little qualification. Circumstantial. Maybe it's a friend or a family member that's in need, that needs your help, that's in a difficult situation, that's taking everything out of you to look after them. Or maybe it's the pressure of a new job, or, something's changed and it means you can hardly practice. You've not got the energy, or even inclination to practice is being taken out of you by pure and simple a life circumstance situation that's going on for you right now. Right. So first of all, Karma Yoga. It's the yoga of the Bhagavad Gita, right? Do what's expected of you and do it with an open heart, right? And also because you can do no other, right? If someone's demanding your help, then to not give that, to say, I need to make sure I've got all my energy for my own practice, so I can't really help you, whatever. You'd always be thinking about it though, You'd always be thinking about, I should be, and do what needs to be done, And do it with an understanding that often what goes around comes around as well. It's quite, because we live and we make meaning together, And so helping others, somehow we always help ourselves, And you'll always learn something about yourself in this process. But in all of these qualifications, actually, physical, mental, and circumstantial, right? So Karma Yoga, the yoga of the Bhagavad Gita, do your duty, not because you have to. Duty I always have a problem with that idea of do your duty, because it always sounds a bit moral. It sounds a bit moralizing. Nothing to do with morality, right? Do what's expected of your role, and with an open heart, because in a certain sense, you can do nothing else anyway. So just embrace it, get on with it, do what you can, do what needs to be done. And then also, as I've said already, nothing is lost by a rest. You can't practice for a week, 2 weeks, a month, even a number of months, even a year. Nothing really is lost ever. And in terms of actually losing ability in practice, as I said, that takes at least a year or two to actually lose that ability. And you can come back to it. So just because you take a rest, it's no problem at all. And sometimes in taking a rest, you get a different perspective. When I had my shoulder injury, I took a little bit time off, and I had looking at it from the outside again, because I wasn't fully enmeshed in a daily practice, I could really see things more clearly. And when I came back to it, I was refreshed. I could see things from a different perspective. Hesitate, I say, I could even see things from a slightly wider perspective, a slightly deeper perspective. So sometimes you need a break, and it's just going to be a period of time. It's always a period, So, any general thoughts in wrapping up? Well, first of all, drop the bar. At these times of difficulty, just be grateful for anything. Just getting on the mat, just doing something. There's no standard to live up to. There'll be a time in your life when you can push the bar a bit, but this is not the time. Doing anything is good, Keep your hand in. That's the second thing I would say. Keep your hand in and do something. If you stop altogether moving or altogether thinking about yoga, it'll be hard to get the habit back, It's like keeping a spark of a fire, smouldering, just that little spark, and then you can ignite the fire when you need to again. But if you keep the little spark smouldering, it's always there for you. So even 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, you'd be amazed at how little you need just to keep the little habit. The main thing is habit, right? If you imagine pushing a rock from standstill, that's really hard. But if the rock is rolling, even a tiny bit, it's much easier to start pushing it faster again. Yep. So don't let things go to standstill altogether, to grind to a halt. If you can, just do a little bit. That really is more, you'll be surprised at how little you need to do for what you get out of that. Yeah. And remember that this time of yoga, is the real yoga. The time when you're up against it, when the shit hits the fan, that's the real yoga. As I said, it's not when you get the perfect conditions, everything's going great, I can do my full practice, and I've completed it, I feel pretty good about it. That's building. That's just, if anything, that's just trying to build the confidence and the depth of commitment through good experiences to weather these bad ones where the real yoga happens, when you might have the opportunity to look at things and really go deeper. Yeah. These are opportunities. I mean, again, I hesitate to be too optimistic or Pollyanna, as we say, about it, because you're probably thinking, oh God, it's easy for you to say, I'm really at a difficult stage right now and nothing feels very positive at all. I can't see anything good out of this situation. But really, honestly, the two most difficult situations of my life with practice have been it's like the phoenix rising from the ashes. I always felt like that. And the phoenix, you have to burn down completely. You have to burn down the old to build up again the new. And that's the same with learning, is oftentimes you have to almost go to ground zero again to build up a whole new framework. Yep. That's some of us, that's what we have to do. And me, I'm one of them. So these times are the times that I've really learned. The good times, probably not so much, but it's these times when I've had the time to look again, to reflect, to really go deeper into myself, and where the real yoga, use that word, real yoga happens. Yeah. And again, like I said, I think it's a great piece of advice that I didn't make myself. Deal with the present. You can't deal with the future. Concentrate on the present and doing your job in the present, whatever that is, and let the future take care of itself. All you can do is take care of the present. Yeah. And finally, give yourself a break, for God's sakes. Yeah. Don't give yourself a hard time. Yeah. Think well of yourself. Yeah. And find support. Let people help you. Yeah. We can't do this stuff on our own most of the time. Even a kind person to talk to. Yeah. Find a therapist of some form or fashion. Yeah. Or find a friend you can discuss things with. Let people help you. Let people support you as well. It makes so much difference in terms of our mental state. If we can share this and share our difficulties with someone, even if you can just say your worries, you feel, to anyone, And of course, sometimes it's easy to find someone who's not involved with you. So you could say without worrying them, having to worry about worrying them, how you feel. But do that. It really, just getting it off your chest, makes such a big difference. And if you can't find anyone to share this with, write it down. Yep, doing a little bit of journaling. I mean, I know it's a bit cliche these days, but a little bit of journaling every day, that's really beneficial. It really, these affirmations, just to affirm positive things about yourself, right? Or just share yourself fears. Write down the worst fear, and looking at it straight in the face, you can cope with it. It's when it's shadowy, it's uncertain, it's behind closed doors, that it has more power of you. Always looking at things, also looking at your circumstances as well, and getting more information around them and looking at them square in the face, they're always manageable. It's when you don't, and when you try and avoid them, that they have power over you. So, hope this helps somewhat. And again, I'm speaking to myself in all of this, because these are all things that I've used over the years for myself and dealing with difficult situations. And we're all going to we're all going to find these situations happen to us in life, because I think, unfortunately, these days, we have the picture in the modern kind of influencer culture that life is a kind of pleasure garden, that, we're expected to be in an infinite state of further and further, deeper and deeper euphoria, deeper and deeper achievements, pleasure, excitements. Yeah. But actually, yoga philosophy says the opposite. Life is perennially difficult. Yeah. Dukkha, the word for suffering, doesn't mean suffering, but it means, we often hear this, it means faulty wheel, a wheel that is a bit bumpy, that doesn't turn so good. Yeah. So it's unsatisfactory. Sometimes it's really bumpy, and it doesn't turn at all. But oftentimes it's just like a bit uncomfortable. Yep. And that's the nature of life that yoga lays down. And so starting from that point, that life is going to be difficult, it's going to be unsatisfactory, and that you can still do things to make it better for yourself, but don't expect that it should be good, because that expectation, that's a lot of our suffering. If we just expect that, not in a bad way, not in like a kind of downer, kind of pessimistic way, or we expect life to be bad, but if you had any expectation of anything being good, and you're starting from the positive, if any moment is good, free from suffering and pleasant, and you're free enough, and not being tyrannized mentally, physically by a government, and you're just free to do practice, then that is already a blessing. And I know it's hard to get our head around those kind of things, because we often lose sight when things are okay of the blessing that it is to have things to be okay. And that also means that when it's not okay, it also really puts those things puts our life into context and makes you realize what's really important. And for some reason, as soon as times are good again, we forget that. So this is an opportunity. Or if you're feeling fine right now, know that it won't always be that way, and you can use this and come back to it later, perhaps. Save it for later. Because I do hope you're feeling great right now, of course. But if you're not, and these things happen, then I hope some of this helped you. And if you've got other tips to share, as I said, this is always a two-way dialogue, a two-way conversation, and I'm more interested, to be honest, in hearing what you have to say and what you're thinking than listening to the sound of my own voice once again. So, all that said, I do hope you have a great week, of course. Of course I do. And I'll see you again next week with another guest. So, hope you liked it, and bye for now. Namo Namah.